Nan, thank you so much for coming and doing this.
And
Rollin with Olan.
I'm always rolling with Olan. Anything for you.
Isn't this exciting? I mean, from, just knowing each other for
my
so
God.
long.
And then going apart and coming back. It's just
That's
everything
That's
for me.
That's it, and I love to tell it. I have your resume here, which I've read, and I've known a lot about you because I've talked to you so many times, and we've been able to share such great things. And your resume is so full, but I'm just going to put it to the side because I just want to start with. Can you kind of let my audience know how we met?
Oh, the best story ever. I was literally maybe 2 years into my career. I just started my own PR firm, very, very young, to be fair. I'm not that old yet. And I was driving on Sunset, and I saw this really cool something going on up there, and I had to pull over and stop. And I met this very handsome, young, fun, charismatic guy, and we just struck up a conversation, and 30 something years later, it really hasn't stopped.
40. And do you know
But who's counting?
What was that you saw?
I saw this amazing billboard with live people on it. And
People living on a billboard, right?
People living, the original Survivor before it existed.
Pretty crazy. And you came up to me, and the way I remember it, and you came up, we started talking, and you just were like, "Do you have a publicist?" And I was like, "No, I don't know. What's up, right?" And something like that. And you were like, "Well, you're gonna get in touch with me. We're gonna talk, and I'm gonna make sure." And you did. You got me into all kinds of different things. And I remember in those days, because I don't think it's around anymore. I might be wrong, but TV Guide. Mm-hmm. Is it still around?
It's still around. Unfortunately, a friend of mine who was the West Coast editor, they just let him go because they're downsizing.
Right.
It's still there, not near as prestigious as it used to be.
Okay, so TV Guide, you got me into TV Guide, and you said, "Jeff, you got to come up with a photo. We need a photo of you." And I remember it was last minute. Didn't have time to get a photo of me, but TV Guide still did a little loop on me.
Maybe a little bar.
And Nancy Reagan was on the cover. I remember that.
Oh,
that was
wow.
1985 or 84. Nancy Reagan was on the cover, and then they had a little thing, what's it called? A little blip? Blurb, thank you. Only a publicist would know that.
Mm-hmm.
So, there you go.
Some things don't change.
Nan, you have been a publicist for, years and years.
Since I was a fetus, I guess.
A fetus,
Yeah.
okay, we'll go with that.
Okay, let's go with that.
That's a good, but Disney, ABC, all kinds of different...
Warner Brothers twice.
Warner Brothers, Aaron
Twice.
Spelling, that's a whole nother story. How did you get into PR? I mean, what was your grand entrance into...
Literally, I was studying at school, and I knew I wanted to get into the entertainment industry, but I didn't know what I specifically... At first, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, and I thought, oh my God, I have to be on camera. No, that's not going to work for me. And I started reading at school all these things under the communications banner, specifically public relations. And I said, yes, I love to write. I love to interact. I love to be strategic. I love to be able to write strategically. This is it. And while I was still in school, I got an internship at a very small PR firm, but our East Coast office represented some really cool people like Sam Waterston and Barry Bostwick. I still remember this, and Alan Alda. And here on this coast, we represented Andrew Stevens. Andrew Stevens, and a couple other people I don't remember. But by the time I had that internship for a while, and I had still like 2 more years in school. So by the time I graduated, I had literally gone from a couple of different PR firms, and I had like almost 2 years of solid account executive experience. So right after school, I started working at different PR firms, and then I said, you know what? I'm just going to open my own. Everybody else is doing it. And that's what I did. And that's when I met you.
That's it. It was Sumski and Green.
Sumski Green. My partner, Max Green, who I met at a PR firm before, he and I decided to open our firm. And we represented Christy and Jimmy McNichol right off the bat. And we had some great clients. I did John Larroquette's first Emmy campaign
right?
for the original. I do all the OG shows, so OG Night Court. I did his. I did Linda Lavin's Tony Award campaign for Broadway Bound. And I worked with Susan Day on LA Law. I worked with Sandy Duncan during the Hobbit Fest. So these were like the 80s time, which is when, and after a while I had a few clients at Lorimar, and I really didn't like signing clients because that took up a lot more work than it did. It's almost like you have to do half your job signing clients, half your job representing them, and there's no time for anything. And Lorimar, I was talking to my contact there, and he said, do you know anybody who would want to come over and be a PR person here? I said, yeah, me. And they said, oh my God. And they hired me literally right away. I knew nothing about production. I've been on sets before, but it's different when you're representing a single person versus the show. And nobody there really schooled me. So I spent years teaching myself how to do PR in between on a production without holding up the production. And you literally have to have a mindset like a producer, like an AD, an assistant director. So I spent my time at Lorimar. Lorimar merged into Warner Brothers. They merged, and my boss got let go, and they brought in this other woman by the name of Barbara Brogliotti, and she was a ball buster. But boy, you know where you stood with her.
Yeah, you learned.
Well, she maybe wasn't as good with the talent, but she really kept the ball rolling there. And I remember one time, and I tell this to my students a lot, during that time while I was there weren't, all of a sudden I started noticing, now that we're with Warner Brothers, even though Lorimar had more shows, Warner Brothers was the parent company. So we merged with the Warner TV unit, and most of the people I worked with at Lorimar were disappearing, and I literally was one of the few people there. Anyway, one day I was sitting in the office with Barbara, and we were talking about something, and she said, you know what, you're my worst writer. This is how she talked. After I got rid of the lump in my chest, I said, well, Barbara, what do you recommend so I can get better? She goes, I'm going to send you to a UCLA extension. So we had moved from the Sony lot where Lorimar was to the to the Burbank lot. I lived down in Long Beach at the time in Lakewood. So I drove every day, 5 days a week from Long Beach to Warner Brothers, twice a week at night. I took a UCLA extension class. I went over to Westwood. God, I was young then. Thank God I had the energy. But it changed my life taking this class. It was a journalist, and for the life of me, can't remember his name. But it really reinvigorated my love of writing. He taught me use active verbs, make every word count, and really just reinvigorated my appeal and excitement about writing again. And a few months later, I was talking to Barbara again, one-on-one, and I said, Barbara, I want to thank you for sending me to that class. And I just said what I said to you. It really invigorated me. I love that feeling of being able to just find my passion for writing again. She said, you know, you were my worst writer. Now you're my best writer.
Look at that.
And that's the Barbara, and I loved her for as tough as she was on me. Boy, it really kind of kicked me into gear.
It taught you to kick into gear. Plus, you also, you were driving at night. You were driving a lot of miles during the day. You were ambitious. You went for it. You got it. And throughout your career, that's what you did. And so it leads me to somebody else who was such a great influence on you, I know. And for our audience, and I believe you were the first and only publicist for Spelling Television.
Yes.
Head of Publicity for Spelling Television. And Aaron Spelling, for the audience members that don't know, and most do, I mean, he did from Love Boat, Heart to Heart, Dynasty. I think he goes way back to even, did he do Dragnet? I believe he might have had something to do with that in the early days.
He did Burke's Law. That's how long
way back. Right, way back. And then you worked with him on several different things. You did Seventh Heaven. You did Charmed with Alyssa Milano.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell us about your relationship with Aaron Spelling.
Okay.
Iconic Aaron Spelling.
All right. I have to get there first. So I want to kind of go a little chronologically, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
When I was at Warner Brothers, I met a young actor, an up-and-coming actor, and this is now the 90s. A man by the name of George Clooney. Maybe you've heard of it?
Yeah, it rings a bell.
Okay. Anyway, George and I, we did our first show together. It was this show. It was back in those days, there were no shows that aired during the summer. It was all repeats. And this show was off schedule. It was done, and don't forget, there was no Netflix, no, even cable was minimal. So press was bored. What are they going to do? So they would just come to our set, right, left, and center. And it was an okay show. It was called Bodies of Evidence on CBS, and it starred George Clooney and Lee Horsley, who people knew from Matt Houston and Aaron's show before my time. And Lee was a really nice guy, but a little kind of, not a lot of personality comes out in the interview. So George and Lee would do interviews together, and George was just effervescent with personality. And he would make really funny jokes because the press would ask questions like, well, what makes this show different? And George would go, Lee and I give everybody a car if you watch it. And he'd say all these really fun things. And so Warner Brothers really started a love affair with George. George is one of the smartest people I've ever met in this industry because he knows how to work the system. He makes friends in every department. And he went in, I was working on a show also at Warner Brothers called Sisters. And Sisters, the late great Bob Butler was one of our producers. I don't know, he just passed recently this summer, but...
You helped launch Sisters.
I did launch
right?
Sisters,
right.
yes. In the 90s, starring Swoosie Kurtz, Patricia Callenber, Celia Ward, who won an Emmy for the show, and Julianne Phillips as four sisters with boys' names, because their dad wanted a boy. Anyway, George was up for a part to be Celia's love interest, and after Bodies of Evidence ended, he called me up and he goes, I auditioned and I used your name. I said, oh, George, that's really going to get you the role. But he got the role, and he did that show until he was hanging around casting one day, and there was a script floating around called ER, and he read it, and he was mesmerized, and he petitioned our showrunner, John Wells from China Beach, please, I got to get the show, and he got it. He got the role, and on his own merits, he's a wonderful actor, and he called me up one day, and he said, I'm working on this pilot. You got to work on it with me. I said, what is it, George? And he goes, ER. I said, I'm already on it. He goes, oh, good.
Wow.
So having that relationship with George made my life a lot easier, because that show, again, thinking about Barbara, who was my boss, I could have been another lazy publicist and just my phone was ringing off the hook for interviews. Mm-hmm. I could have literally just taken the interview, but I wanted more. How do I get it to that next level? Magazine covers. So one week we shot an iconic week of covers. We shot one night the Newsweek cover, which was called the cover try because we weren't guaranteed the cover. The next night we shot the cover of TV Guide, and the third night we shot Entertainment Weekly with all 6 actors on the cover. And Newsweek meant so much to me, A, because it was off the TV pages, as we call it. We sweated out that cover because there was some strife going on in the Middle East, and I got the call, we are confirmed to get the cover. And that cover hung on Stage 11 at Warner Brothers for the entire 15 years that show was on the air. I only did the first year and a half of the show. So for me, that was an honor. And then literally a couple of years ago during the pandemic, they were doing a lot of these kind of Zoom for charity cast reunions, and ER did one, and everybody was there, I think except Eric LaSalle, who was busy working and played Dr. Benton, and George was in London, and he kept getting cut off at like 3 a.m, he kept getting back on, it was so great, and they talked about that cover, and they talked about keeping it classy, and that was the theme on that set, because George would say to the other actors, hey you guys, Nan and I have worked together a long time, whatever she says, do it. And it was this great synergy that we did on that show. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you this story, and I have one really fun story to tell you guys.
But first of all, hang on to that. George did pretty good, hasn't he?
Just a little bit.
Yeah,
I wrote this first Tonight Show. I'm the one who talked him into it.
You did? Really? You talked him into the first Tonight Show? Why do you need you to talk him into it?
Well, I knew what an amazing interview he was, but he didn't have the project behind him yet. And his essence, like I'm all about when a celebrity, or for that matter, a director or producer has this wonderful essence in an interview. A lot of it's so natural, and the most important thing is to let that bubble out. And George still interviews that same way today, and I just smile and think about those days because he really, really was there and really hasn't changed.
Yeah, what a class act, right?
Class act all the way
Completely
around.
cross-eyed,
Understands the industry. I mean, he really gets it.
He's so well loved too. Very well
And
loved.
deservedly so. He's a
Absolutely.
wonderful human being who's done a lot of great things for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now that has something to do with leading into Aaron Spelling.
Getting there. I'm getting there. So my last day, I was leaving, why I left ER and the Warner Brothers, they were launching a new network and they couldn't promote me up anymore. And my boss said, we'd like to transfer you to this new network we're starting called the WB Network.
Right.
And they were offering me a lot more money, and I thought, okay, I'll go over there and help jumpstart the network. My last day was the Friday before the Emmys, that Sunday, 1995. And ER was nominated for all these Emmys, and I got an emergency. This is 7:30 at night, my last day.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very fun story I haven't really told out
I'm
in the
excited.
world.
Let's hear it.
And it was John Wells' assistant. By the way, ER, I forgot to mention, the other two producers on ER, maybe you've heard of him, Steven Spielberg?
Steven Spielberg. Yeah. Name comes up. Yeah.
You might. And maybe you've heard of the guy who created ER, Michael Crichton. You know?
Oh gosh, yeah. Michael Crichton.
People don't realize Michael Crichton, ER is based on his real life as a resident in Boston going through his doc residency. He saw it through the eyes of the Noah Wiley, the young resident's character. And that really was the jump start of ER. But anyway, I got this emergency call my last day. I'm moving over to the net, going to cover the awards that Sunday, the Emmys, and Monday I would start at the WB. And I got this urgent call from John's office. Nan, John needs you in his office right away. Stephen and Michael, we all need to talk to you. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? So I don't walk, run over to his office on the Warner lot, and the door is closed. And they're all like, oh, go in. I open the door and there's this cake. We love you. We're going to miss you. And they all.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
that really. That's why you do what you do.
Well,
The covers are great, and that's the stuff that just stick with me after all these years,
Yeah.
And then I got to see, I worked with Stephen and Michael, and John and the whole cast at the Emmys, and I just remember one of my proudest moments was the Emmy Award for this episode called Love's Labor is Lost, directed by Mimi Leader, who now is doing the morning show, but she was the only woman nominated and won, and she deserved it because I've read a million scripts over the years, as I'm sure you have, but when I read that script, it really resonated with me. And my friend Phil Gonzalez, who now works at CBS, he did a little show. He and I kind of tag team. Maybe you've heard of it, Friends?
Friends. You know a few people, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe a couple.
Yeah, anyway, Phil and I were the only, back then, we didn't have huge staffs.
Yeah.
And Phil and I were sitting there, he's covering Friends at the Emmys, I'm covering ER, and what if you have back-to-back categories and you win, you go backstage and you can't run back and get the next. So Phil and I agreed to back each other up on our people because we had back-to-back nominees should we win. And ER, Love's Labor's Lost, won back-to-back. I took Mimi through, but our writer, who was our tech advisor, but a wonderful man by the name of Lance Gentile, won. And Phil, who didn't even know him, took him, but I was prepared to take Friends if I needed to. I actually went to the Friends set once. George and Noah, in the first season, did a cameo, and George hadn't been in front of an audience. He kept calling me, please come over, and I'm like, okay. So I remember walking over there, to that stage. And back then we didn't have badges. You couldn't, security.
Right.
Yet you worked on the lot. Everybody knew everybody. So you just walk on in.
Yeah.
And I knew the line producer because I worked with him on a show. So I saw him. And I just stood there and waited for George and Noah. So that was my whole Friends experience. But Phil and I always tag teamed, and because of that at award shows, because, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so here I am at the WB network, and I'm working, we mostly had sitcoms. We had the Wayans brothers, who I adored, Sean and Marlon. They're two of the politest guys you'll ever meet. They always said please and thank you no matter what you did
They're
for them.
great guys. Yeah, I worked with them as well.
Oh, yeah.
Really great guys.
Love, their mama raised them right. I always told them that.
Yeah.
And we had all sitcoms. But we were doing our first ever drama series. And nobody at the network really understood the difference on how to, in production. And of course, I come from Sisters and ER and all this, you know, working on and I did the first, last year, Falcon Crest, believe it or not, when Jane Wyman spilled all the tea about Nancy Reagan in an interview with Dominic Dunn for Vanity Fair.
Oh, wow.
How cool is that?
Very cool.
And here I am, a kid sitting at that interview, right?
Well, kid, with all these people looking at, I mean, you know, you have to pinch yourself sometimes, right, for the success that you've had. And this is early on. And we haven't even gotten to your later years yet, so keep going. I want to hear more.
And then, okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm just talking. But
no, well, that's what
happens.
This is all about.
Okay, so here I am at the WB, and the show's called Savannah. So I'm like, okay. So the executive producer, a man named Aaron Spelling, and I was like, oh, okay. So I start calling him. I had no idea he had this, like, inner sanctum around him. So I would just call him, and it was the only drama series we had. And, you know, I'd get on the phone with him and I'd talk to him. And then we got that show going. And then we had another show he was doing called Seventh Heaven. And I was also covering that. I was doing all the drama series. And then we had a third show we were doing, not an Aaron Spelling show, called, maybe you've heard of it, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes, of course.
So I did that show as well. So I worked with Aaron on those. I went, during that time, I actually had a baby. And I came back to work. And we had a kind of a new structure there. And unfortunately in this business, you run into people with a bit of jealousy and things. I'm not going to name names, but they were trying to take me off all the dramas, but Aaron refused. He likes who he likes type thing. So I continued on the drama series with him, and I also worked on this show, Tom Arnold's sitcom. It was a veiled sitcom, but I adored Tom Arnold.
Yeah. You liked him a lot.
Oh, I loved him.
You told me that in the past.
Yeah, because he's a big goof and he admits it. And anybody who can understand and really know what they really are as a person, yes, I've made mistakes, I give them credit. And I give Tom a lot of credit for all he's been through and pulled himself together. And a wonderful other man who I loved, Ed McMahon.
Oh, great guy. Yeah, I had a pleasure of meeting him.
Ed was a dear because we had a lot of early things, and I'd always call him up and he'd go, honey, I'm a Marine, 5:30 in the morning, I'll do that radio interview. God bless him. And he had the energy. He was probably in his 70s maybe at the time. And he just had a lot of energy. But that's how I met Aaron. So I came back from maternity leave. I was working on that show. And Seventh Heaven, Savannah was I went 2 seasons and didn't complete. But Aaron called me up one day and he said, I had an amazing development season and I've never had somebody run my in-house TV productions on PR side. And I want to do that and I want it to be you. And what an honor.
What an honor.
I adored this man because the way he was like a little kid. He would get so excited when we would have... Like, I remember telling him I would always put little notes together for him. Aaron, we got the cover of TV Guide for Charmed. So I remember driving. I was covering an interview at Seventh Heaven. It was a Friday night, and we were way out in Lancaster. And I'm driving home down the road, and it's like 7:30. My phone rings, and it's Aaron. And he says to me, first of all, why are you working so late? I said, well, Aaron, we were doing a night shoot. And I was covering the interview. He goes, we really got the cover for Charmed for TV Guide? I said, yes. He goes, he was so excited. And then he proceeded to get mad at me because it was too late for me to be working on a Friday night. Oh, my. But Aaron treated everybody the same. Whether you came in and cleaned his fish tank to the president of our company. He was such a dear, kind man. And I always tell everybody that wants to listen to me, if Aaron Spelling can treat people with kindness and respect, no matter what their position is, why can't everybody else? So I've really, that's been such an important thing in my life, especially going into my career in my latter years, and looking at somebody like a Steven Spielberg, same philosophy. Michael Crichton, these wonderful, powerful people can be so kind and just human beings, whereas a lot of people get so wrapped up in the business and ego. So I really try to tell, I as you know, I teach, and I really try to install that in my students so the next generation can get back to that. That's what we need.
Well, that's, and I'm going to go into that a little bit as well, but, you talk about the passion, you talk about the people in the industry, and you talk about Aaron Spelling, and you were with him, I think, 15 years, which is pretty incredible. And the relationship that you built with him, and for people, for the younger generation, Tori Spelling.
Tori Spelling's dad.
His dog, right? It's just interesting how you build these relationships with all these people, with all the people that you have worked with.
But it's funny because a lot of them are very organic. I didn't set out to have this relationship with George Clooney like that. It just happened. We just clicked.
And you and Alyssa Milano?
Oh, well. My girls, all my charm girls.
Right, all of them.
All of them. I mean, we still have. We're like a family. We occasionally get together. Alyssa, I'm so proud of the woman she's become. I remember talking to her when she was having a little get together at her house, and I was over there, and she'd gotten married and she had her first child, Milo. And she was a little on the fence about having a second one. And I'm like, oh, you can have a kid later on. And she ended up having her daughter. Oh. And it's just been so lovely. And meeting her husband David, who was at CAA, now I believe he's at Range Partners. They're just the best. He's brought out the best in her. And it just makes me so happy to see that.
Yes. And you stayed fairly in touch with some of the people that you
Definitely the girls have charmed. Definitely Ernie Hudson, one of my, in fact, his birthday's coming up.
Happy birthday, Ernie.
I just got a Christmas card from him and his wife. That's so sweet. They are two of my favorite people. They did a short-lived show. Well, Ernie did a short-lived show for Aaron called 10-8 Officers on Duty. And it was like Adam 12, kind of revisited. And I remember it was on ABC, and one of my favorite things I did for Aaron was the fact I was trying to think, what's unique about this show in the PR world? What's a hook or an angle that makes the show unique? Well, we showcase all these realistic areas of LA, from Venice Beach to downtown to Long Beach to
all over the place.
All exteriors. We only were on stage one day a week for an 8.
So all the locations.
Our locations, we really showcase what a melting pot LA is on these different. So I petitioned the mayor of Los Angeles to make October 8th 10-8 day in the honor of that. Get it? 10-8, 10-8, October 8th.
Wow.
Anyway, I sent a little note down to Aaron's office, as I used to do on the fax. That was fax days. My phone rang 2 seconds later. His assistant called. He wants to see you right now. I thought, oh boy, am I in trouble? I walk in, and Aaron's sitting behind his desk, and Jonathan, our president, the wonderful Jonathan Levin, who I adore and still keep in touch with, was sitting there, and he looked at me, and he goes, this. I said, what's wrong with? He goes, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. How did you do this?
Love it.
I said, I just petitioned the mayor's office.
Wow, that's incredible. That's good. Well, look.
And we got these beautiful plaques.
A plaque that
which Aaron insisted
put up on the wall right away.
Get to. He wanted one for his office and one for our showrunner.
So, what's your favorite thing about? What was your favorite thing about being a publicist when you were like a working publicist? Is there any one thing?
Those things. Yeah, those moments. When Aaron says, "This is the most brilliant thing I've ever seen." When ER, after all these years, that cover hung in on that stage, and the cast still talked about it, literally reuniting during the pandemic. And another story which I haven't told yet.
Yeah, please.
the last year of Charmed, we knew we were ending after 8 seasons, and everybody, kind of the morale on the set got kind of sucky, and everybody was just phoning it in. And I said, I can't let this show go out that way. This is a family. I mean, I'm talking from the people who work the cameras and the craft service and every single person on that set, to the writers, to Aaron and Duke and everybody in the office, and of course the cast. This can't go out this way. There's got to be something about this show. It's not the longest running sci-fi fantasy show. No, I know that's X-Files, 9 seasons. And of course I started thinking back. I've worked on a lot of shows with women, all female leads. I thought of Sisters. And I called up the TV museum radio broadcasting. Something just clicked. And they said, well, as a matter of fact, Charmed is going to surpass Laverne and Shirley as the longest running show in TV history featuring female leads. Now, the girls, who are all about female empowerment, when I came back and told Brad Kern, our showrunner, and Aaron and Duke this, and the girls were like, well, we got to promote this. This is amazing. Yes, we did promote it. Yes, we did big events on it. Yes, we got a lot of press on it. But the best thing of all of it, Jeff, the morale on the set went through the roof. Everybody was walking around so proud to be there again. And I'm talking everybody. The behind the scenes, our wonderful crew who was with us all these years, our actors, our writers, that's what matters the most to me.
That's what matters, right? So that's the that's the takeaway that you get from all these years and all the successes that you've had along the way, and and I think that's great. You talk about ER a lot. You talk about the cast. I want to just throw in because of what I do, I think it's so important to just kind of talk about for a second.
No,
you did a show like ER, okay. Yes. ER, can you explain how integral the background actors were to a set like ER?
It was like another character, just like our Steadicam, our wonderful, wonderful guy, Norman B. Remember that name. He is one of my favorite people in life, next to you, of course. And you should have him on here with you because he set that amazing Steadicam tone. He became a wonderful director after that. He's one of my favorite people. But another thing we did was the hustle and bustle of that show could not work without the wonderful work of a key second AD, assistant by the name of Michael Pendel, and his work pulling together these terrific background actors who would literally make these crosses and be all these different, from patients to visitors to staff personnel, doctors. We had in the trauma rooms a lot of background actors that were actually on their days off, doctors and nurses. But we had the bulk of them. If you see the busy scenes as the camera goes through, that kind of work, these background actors were so talented at what they did and doing all of this. And another thing about background actors that are so important to somebody like me, when I'm doing photo shoots and things, as you know well, we have our first team, our regular actors, but our second team are people who stand in for the actors. If I'm doing a photo shoot adjacent to the set and I need the 3 girls, the girls are working on Charmed, I'm going to pull their stand-ins who have a little bit of physical similarities to them. And they'll come over and sit in for me so I can But anyway, back to the ER people. That was a huge part of our show. It was
very pivotal, right?
Very. And in fact, I got tasked with the first season. We, under the banner of Synergy, the show Extra TV, which is still on today, like Entertainment Tonight, wanted to spend a month on our set. And I didn't want them... I wanted to give them, because it went all the way up the pike through Warner Brothers and back down through my boss to me. You need to make this happen. But I didn't want to tax my 6 regulars with a month long following them everywhere. So I wanted to come up with unique things that would give the audience behind the scenes of the show that maybe didn't focus every minute on the 6. So we had a whole bunch of recurring regulars, a bunch of characters who played nurses.
Nurses and doctors.
Yes, that had semi-regular roles. They were featured. But one of the things we did was we did a whole thing with Mike, our key second AD, on how he sets all these background actors So Guy could shoot on the Steadicam what we call a oneer. And literally it would take an hour to set up this one shot. Well, I cast this to you and you go here and the camera follows you and all of that. And if one person messed up, oh boy, we got to start all over again. The extras were the best. It was our regular actors who would mess up more. But that they were just such an important part of this show and setting that tone for it. And so having Mike, who was such a dear help to me, go and talk about the intricacies of putting all this it was like choreography, you know, so it really meant a lot.
I love that you say that, because background actors are so important to everything. And, you know, you talk about the background actors, you talk about, you have mentioned, this is interesting. Like I look, I'm jumping around here,
No,
but
please.
you know, can you talk about like what the new generation of publicists are going to need nowadays? Because look, I'm hearing you are mentioning everybody's name that you worked with all throughout. You could tell how passionate you are about the industry and how much you have been. I mean, you're talking about not only extras, you're talking about, you know, the assistant director, the second assistant director. You know names of everybody. So in the new generation of publicists, what do they need to learn nowadays to become successful?
I certainly believe in one of the things they need to learn is to be kind to everybody on a set. You need, especially if you're working on a set, you're going to need these people. It's so nice to be able to know everybody by name. I spent a lot of time on all my sets, especially when you have crew that's there day in and day out. They're there before the actors, they're there after the actors. I'm talking the background is too, the stand-ins. Right. And you want to make friends, you want to have those relationships. Because when I say, oh shoot, I need an apple box, and have the entire grip department run over, Nan needs an apple box, hurry. And the whole staff leaves to come over and help you. I mean, I think it's really important to check your ego at the door. You are just part of the team, and as long as you learn that, and nobody is better than anybody else, that is super, super important. And I think today with the advent of social media and everybody can be a star type thing, including those of us behind the scenes, you need to still remember that. Sure, get your social media out. Sure, do all of these things. But first, be a human being.
So well said. So well said. I mean, you know, it really is about that, and especially in the new generation of publicists now, having to understand people, right? People first and foremost, then understanding the social media, then understanding, you know, how to get things out there.
And I always say, how do you work with difficult talent? I get that question a lot in my classes. You meet the talent where they are. Sometimes they don't want to hear things. Sometimes they're a little difficult. I always say this joke, and I loved her dearly. She was a tough one, Faye Dunaway. I did her sitcom debut. Wasn't a big hit, didn't really work, but Faye didn't really understand the difference between coming off a film or even a 2-hour movie, which she did, to doing a half-hour sitcom in front of an audience. And we had to kind of school her and talk to her about it. You can't sit in here and make up for too long. We have to do this. So a lot of times it's a learning curve for all of us. And if it's, you have to have those difficult conversations with talent, but you have to phrase it in a way to involve them, to make them a partner with you. And I think when you do that, it really makes it help. It makes it matter and makes it count.
Perfect sense. And you talk about celebrities or what have you that might be a little more troublesome to work with. How is it when you have like you know, bad news comes out about somebody? How does a publicist clean that up? Because I know, you know, you do certain things. Publicists are so important. And there's people that unfortunately something happens with them. They get,
and it's every day.
Every day something. How do you clean that up?
Well, I always say to people, number one, it's like, remember when you were in grade school and you're in, you know, elementary school, and a kid barfs and everybody goes ha 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 till the next day, and a kid splits their pants and everyone goes ha ha and talks about that. That's the kind of thing that happens every day. You cannot put it into a formula. You have to meet each situation where it is. So, case in point, during the years, it's no secret that Shannon Doherty left 90210. And coming back, she was reuniting with Aaron Spelling. And I knew in advance, thinking about this ahead of time, we were going to meet the press, a big panel thing called the Television Critics Association, to launch the show. The first thing I said to Aaron was, I know that press is going to bring this up. We need to deal with it. And a lot of times, if you can anticipate and head it off at the pass like we did here, Aaron said, oh, that's a good point. So he had his assistant set up a meeting with myself, with him, with Shannon. Her publicist is based in New York, so she was on the phone. And then we were in Aaron's office, and we talked about it. And Shannon said, well, I was young then, and I've really matured. And Aaron, reached out to me, which all was true. And they were both on the same side and talking about these same points. And Aaron said, I thought of Shannon immediately. And I said, you guys, this is perfect. Let's say this. Another thing I did was a very subtle thing. When we were in front of the television critics, which is a room of 100 and something, kind of persnickety at times, critics, who are a little bit jaded because they've been there, done that. When we were sitting in front of these critics, I said to the WB, because they sit people where they're supposed to sit, and obviously the people get the most questions to be, so Aaron would be in the middle. I said, Aaron has a request. He'd like to sit next to Shannon. So we did that. And Aaron's he was always very a warm, huggy kind of guy, so he would touch her hand. There was real warmth there, and that came through. So therefore, I had them talk about it before it even came up in the press. So it was dealt with.
Right.
So when there is an issue, I always say this. I always bring up, I wish I could give you, oh, this is the set formula to use. It doesn't work that way. It's each individual situation. But I will tell you this. If you do not address it in the press and put what I call that nice little pretty bow on the top, and there's questions, press is going to keep digging, especially entertainment press. So by answering their questions, even if you don't know, and again on a PR site, it's from our tonality. If we say no comment and hang up versus I don't have all the facts yet for you, let me get back to you, and just make sure you do. So that's my kind of what I do to try to deal with the situation.
It's kind of what you do for those situations. Now, what thing can you tell us about what's in the daily life of a publicist? Tell us from waking up through the day.
Well, I always do a scenario. And when as you know, I teach PR now. And when I talk to my students about entertainment PR, I say, picture yourself in downtown Los Angeles and the lights are out. Lost all power. And you're up. Pick the two tallest buildings, and there's a tightrope between the two buildings. And you are walking that tightrope in the pitch black with no net, juggling lit chainsaws on fire. That is the day of a PR person. You will go in and say, maybe I'm going to work on nuts and bolts today. I'm going to be pitching my whoever client to a certain media outlet, and then something happens and things change. Maybe you're on a set part of the day and covering interviews. Maybe you're at an awards event. Every day is different, and just because you have a schedule set up doesn't mean you're going to be on that schedule, which is why I say the lit chainsaws on fire.
So very challenging, stressful, I would imagine.
Very, and multitasking is a huge priority, and learn to compartmentalize and prioritize.
Well, you've done it well, and then you've had your career that has just been beyond successful. You have to pinch yourself sometimes I'm guessing you do. But then after you got through all that, you went on and you started teaching, like you alluded to, and you're teaching at USC in the Annenberg. You're teaching at Los Angeles Film School.
Yes.
Tell us about the teaching, because I know you're very excited from what I've heard. And please tell the audience about what that is like, teaching and working with the students now.
The most important thing for me is watching when the proverbial light bulb goes off for them. I had one girl this past semester come up to me and say, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but after taking this class, you have no idea the impact you've made on me. And I've gotten notes from a couple of different students all across the board with these profound, beautiful, well thought out, you've made such an impact in my life. And I literally would almost want to cry, and how much that they appreciate And it's maybe something little I've taught them. Maybe it's just I've changed, but that, you can't put a price tag on that. I'm talking across the board.
Well, across the board.
To give back like that.
Right, to give back. You love that. Though.
Oh, to help that next generation.
Yeah.
Because I do talk about the philanthropic endeavors in the industry, and you shouldn't do philanthropic endeavors for the sheer publicity. You don't hear George Clooney out there in the world, he and his wife Amal, talking about their Justice Foundation. He just does it. You don't hear celebrities do that. They just do it. And that, the philanthropic, to me, that's my give back.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've always had such a passion not only for the industry but for teaching, and I know you and I've had conversations, and you're like, hey, I'm up late, I'm grading papers, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm getting up early, I'm going down to USC.
It's a lot of work.
A lot of work, but you still love it.
Oh, it's changed my life. I'm at the point in my career now where I want to give back to that next generation. I tell them, I want you to learn from my experiences, and I've made the mistakes so you don't have to. I've made all these set mistakes on a production, on how to do production PR. So you don't have to. Let me give you some tips.
Yeah. Well,
because nobody taught me this. I taught myself.
You taught yourself, and you're able to bring it to others now, which is so great. And you're, like I say, your career, it's just, it goes on and on and on. And our talks could go on and on and on. And we do. We get together and we talk. We
closed down many a restaurant.
We have. But I'll tell you, there's one thing I want the audience to know. I mean, besides your passion, besides who you are as a person, besides your stories, can you tell us a little bit about Rigby?
Oh, my baby. Rigby is my almost 12-year-old dog who, he loves to be my TA during the pandemic.
Teaching assistant.
He was my TA, teaching assistant during the pandemic. He would sit on my shoulder up on the sofa and be on Zoom watching. We never stopped teaching during the pandemic. He doesn't miss a Zoom meeting.
What's his favorite television show?
Oh, The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. I think my friend tells me it's because Wolf Blitzer sounds, his voice soothes him, and he kind of looks like a wolf. That's what my friend says.
Yeah. Well, look, I know how fondly you are of Rigby, and you talk about, sometimes it's like we're talking, we're like, oh, Rigby's got to watch TV now. We got to get off the phone. We got to go watch the show. But, there's so much that, look, I talk about dogs because we're animal lovers, but just to kind of tie this whole thing together, what's the difference now with all the social media that's going on with publicity and all that? I mean, can you say, kind of give any kind of pointers on that? And you might have alluded to that a little bit, but I just want to go into it a little bit more.
Social media is here to stay. The good news is it's immediate. The bad news is it's immediate. So how does that work? I always say a best PR campaign for a show, for whoever, needs to incorporate regular, what we call traditional media, what we call the digital media space, which is the online, and what we call the social media space. When we're announcing something, what makes sense for each given scenario? Maybe it is going on Instagram and having the celebrity announce it right then and there. Maybe it's taking a step back and announcing it a different way. But you need to be able to manage all different types of media. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
I think it did.
Okay,
yeah, because
good.
I mean, it's out there. There's all these influencers now that
that's another thing, which are part of my digital media when I teach.
Yeah.
Podcasts, influencers, all blogs, all of that.
Yeah. No.
Very important to use. The most strategic campaign uses each and every element.
You hit everything. And, here's the thing. Like I said earlier, we could go on and on and on. And, it's funny because, I've known you for a long time. The billboard thing so many years ago, then you disappeared, I disappeared. And then social media that's what brought us back. It was Facebook that brought us back into,
I love Facebook for that.
Incredible?
For birthdays, for supporting people when they lose people, for being there for people when they have a milestone. all of these things. I mean, I'm so much back. I come from a small town up north of San Francisco, and to be in touch with a lot of my high school friends again, who I really haven't seen since my 10th year reunion, because I've missed a couple of them since, it really means a lot to me.
Well, tying it all in, I thank you so much. I thank you because we could talk forever. I had to make notes on you just because I lost track of everything I wanted to talk to you about. But the truth is, Nan, you've been a friend. You're such a blessing. I love having you in my life, and I love the fact that you're able to do this. And come and join me, Rollin with Olan. I'm just loving it.
There's nothing I'd rather do than Rollin with Olan.
Thank you.
And May 24, Rollin with Olan is the best. This man is the best.